So, good afternoon. Welcome to Panel 3, Precision Medicine and Astronaut Longevity. The moderator is Smith Johnston. And Smith is a distinguished and beloved medical officer and flight surgeon who spent the bulk of his career at NASA, clinically supporting 25 shuttle missions and 2 ISS missions. He completed residencies in internal and aerospace medicine from Wright State University and has helped apply innovations from the U.S. international and commercial space programs to benefit astronauts and those on Earth. Most recently, Smith served as the CMO and lead flight surgeon for Axiom Space. Smith?
All right, if I could have my slides, please. First of all, it's great to be here. Thank you, Jeff. Very kind. And I am retired from those places, so the opinions you're hearing today are my own. And I'll probably get in trouble for that, but that's okay. It's again, wonderful to be here. So we're going to talk about precision medicine and astronaut longevity. And we have an incredible panel, and instead of my usual 200 slides, I've gotten it down really, and I'll try not to talk much at all, but before I introduce all my incredible folks up here, I want to just very briefly kind of set the stage for a lot of this. We're going to talk about, of course, genes plus environment equals health, performance, and then my whole gig has been, let's live long, productive lives. Everything about what we eat, what we breathe, how fit we are, how strong we are, and psychological well-being, the best indicator of that is probably sleep. And they're all linearly correlated with longevity. This is one of my heroes, Joe Kerwin, and I'm dedicating this talk to him, and one of my sheroes, Shannon Lucid, who have both made the over 80 crowd, and I'll go through the lifetime surveillance of astronaut health with some folks here to back me up if I get this wrong and answer questions that I can't answer. But this is the count, the vital stats of the causes of the former astronauts that are alive, deceased, and what they died of. We have 277 living career astronauts, 20% female, 80% male. That's gotten better as we've let competent people in, and 36 in their 80s and 90s. That's 13% of the core. 205 are over 60, and then of the active astronauts, it's a better distribution of 41 female, to male. And this is I have to have pictures, dyslexic, but this are the occupational accidents. The accidents, and these are the numbers. The lower number are the numbers, the amounts, and then the other number is the age. The average age when they came about. And these are the illnesses that are the other illnesses. And the average age of death is 78.4 years of age. For cardiovascular disease and stroke, it's 78.1. For cancer, 71.8. And for accidents, we'll talk about this later, that's why the astronaut mortality curve is not so good, because of the accidents. And then we have the causes of cancer. What we've done together over the last few days is put together all the cancers, the locations, and the number of cancers from brain, head, and neck, mesothelioma, skin, lung, prostate, GI, sarcoma, GU, hematologic. And then if you look at those, the brain has been 3, nasopharyngeal 1, breast, mesothelioma, melanomas, lung, prostate, colon 1, gallbladder. And some things we're doing well. There's only been 1 breast, and I would tell you that was not flight medicine's fault, and colon was not flight medicine's fault. Gallbladder disease, that was probably an occupationally induced cancer. And then we have some unknowns because we don't have all the data in on a few people. We just lost 3 folks in the last few weeks. And then bladder, and then hematologic. And then how do we compare the general population? This is old data. This is 2012. We couldn't update this with the group. But very simply, this curve is a curve, Kaplan-Meier curve of males in the US of A, which is probably worse now. But and then the next 2 lines have equal weight One is you never smoked. The other is you had a normal body weight. And if you're trying to get the curve that way, obviously, this way, and as you move the curve this way. So what that means, if you're an 80-year-old normal male, to get to 80 as a normal male in the U.S., you've only got a 40% chance of making it there. But if you're a normal weight and you have never smoked, then you've doubled that. You're up around 80%. And the astronauts don't do well. That's because of our flight tragedies, which we all know very well. And then our astronauts are really doing pretty well. I would tell you that we could do better, and that's what this panel that we brought together is going to talk about. I spent my career working on the medical systems with some of the folks in this room for the International Space Station, trying to figure out how to do a lot of these things, how to do crikes, how to do chest tubes. Richard and Mark will go down in history as the first people to do laparoscopic surgery in zero gravity, and mostly my contribution to this was this. 10 times the radiation, 10 times the carbon dioxide. The toxicology is really important here. We're going to deal with some new techniques that maybe can help this. And this applies also to where you live, at your house, in your office building. And there have been studies at Chang School of Public Health at Harvard on how important these things are in ventilation. And we'll talk about that. Of course, 10 times the bone loss, and we've done a really great job of figuring that out. And of course, sleep was a big passion of mine. Sleep in orbit has gotten really well. It's gotten much, much better. It's when you're traveling to do all the training back and forth from all over the world that is really, really tough. And if you go out and see a sunrise right before sleep, the only way you're going to get to bed is with a short-acting sleep medicine like Zolpidem or Zalplon. Food, if you talk to Peggy Whitson, she says the most important thing in orbit. This is our present and 2014. This is almost 10 years old, and this I talked with Scott Smith the other day, and this is what we're doing now. This is good for a population. The only supplement we had is vitamin D. But if you do precision medicine, which I'll talk about more, and we have some experts on this, to individualize it, I think we could be using some supplements that would help them, especially in this hazardous advanced state of aging environment that they live in. And I just want to talk briefly about my top outcome for aging and inflammation in the body. It's not you got a bad joint or this and that. It's this thing. It's called a blood vessel. It's arteriovascular inflammation, which is everywhere. It goes everywhere. It's your kidneys. It's your brain. It's everything. And it's this single cell endothelial wall that is really important. This is New England Journal about the same time. A lot of my slides are 10, 15 years old. And of course, we know with double-blinded randomized controlled studies, things that become common knowledge for medicine take 15 to 19 years before they're instituted as practice. You're going to hear some stuff today from these folks that's pretty incredible. But if you've got too much LDL, there you go. Too much LDL, or like my genetics, I have too much. It's tightly packed. It will get through that single cell endothelial wall, and it's the LDL amount, size, plasma viscosity, luminal pressure, coag factors, immunologic insults, inflammatory stressors and chemicals, and others. And the good news is, well, not the good news, but the plaque actually forms in a fashion that's not, we always thought it was sludge in the ice machine, for those of you who are old enough to know the guy that used to do the commercials here in Houston. But it's the plaque, and it's inflammation that causes a rupture and sends the clot downstream. The good news is that you can reverse that with diet, with exercise. Flossing, depending on studies, will give you an extra 2 to 3 years of life. Sleep, stress reduction, which you can train and learn with cognitive behavioral therapy, and of course medications. So you can actually reverse your disease. And again, the first arteries of the heart are the coronary arteries. They're feeding the heart. And the gold standard was to do a cardiac cath to see a lesion. And again, it's not like we've got sludge in the ice machine. It's more, and we discovered that, we didn't, but the folks, really smart folks at all over the country, Cleveland Clinic and other places, Steve Nissen, who I'm quoting a lot in this, found a borescope that you could put in an artery. So that's an ultrasound probe that you could snake down the artery and pull back and measure plaque. So here is a normal looking coronary artery, and that's what it looks like by ultrasound. It's nice and clear. Here you can obviously see the plaque that's built up, but if the angle of attack from the cardiac cath, you may not see that there's a lesion there. So it's not like it's happening in this fashion. It's more like it's happening in this fashion. You're building up goo around this. I know a lot of you have seen me give this slides over and over again for the last 15 years. But still, a lot of physicians, some cardiologists don't know that you can reverse plaque. So you can. So here's a normal, completely normal coronary artery by cardiac cath, which used to be the gold standard. And we'll talk about, you'll see some incredible scans that are being used all over the country now. And that's normal, but there is actually a lesion that's being built up. And this again is a normal coronary artery, and that looks normal. Here, you see this looks normal, but actually there's a big lesion there. And then here is about a 20-30% lesion, which now the mass has gotten to critical mass and it blocks it. So you have, when you do the scan, you see a little indenture there. And so that's what's going on. And that, think of it as belly fat. You can reduce that. You can reverse that. And by the way, that plaque I just showed you, 50% of males and females in this country at the age of 30 have a plaque like that. You can start forming plaques 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. And so we've got to learn, and we have, to reduce these plaques, which we have. That's an astronaut's plaque. I have permission to show that plaque. And we have multiple folks with lesions like that we've reversed. We've actually, over the course of 3 years, reversed that plaque from a total plaque burden of 116%, total aggregate to 97%, Steve Nissen, Cleveland Clinic. The way we start to find plaque early is it forms calcium. That goo turns into calcium. And this was the first scanner they got at Herman Hospital back in 2005. I'm thinking, Gary, you're in that picture back in the back. We took the international partners there to say, this is a screen we should do. And so that shows early heart disease. The problem is that we dinged a lot of people for this early on. And now we know after that we can reverse it. And calcium doesn't break off and go downstream. It's the immunologic insults that combine, like a COVID infection or something like that, that would cause the plaque to erode, or somebody who's in horrible shape or has horrible cholesterol or has inflammatory problems. And I got in the thing and lit it up. And so I went and got my genetics done, and I have a lipo-a, which is not a good thing to have. I also have ApoE. Now you can do a scanner. This was mine 2 years ago. And done at the clinic here. We have a representative. My physician is here, actually. And all this blue is stabilized plaque, and that's my number. I've got a 50% lesion, so I've got a lesion just like we showed earlier. And 2 years later, I've improved my plaque burden from at least 1%, and so I can follow that. And I use myself as a guinea pig because I love to get radiation. Although now the radiation is so small and so little that these scans have less radiation, or about the same as we did the CAC scores, the calcium score. Almost done. So atherosclerotic plaque can be stabilized, can be reversed. You just have to understand your risk factors, your genetics. And now for $900, and in a day, you can get your genetic profile to help explain to you what your problems are. And maybe my LDL cholesterol doesn't need to be, when I was going through training, 300 was normal. Then we went to 200 of cholesterol. Now it's 150, and you probably want your LDL with my profile. I'm on several meds to get it down to as low as 0. So down to, I'm around 36. The other deal is, again, it's not just about plaques in your heart, it's plaques in your brain. That's Alzheimer's, and we can reduce that. We can reduce dementia now. Most of them, there's like 15% of Alzheimer's. It's hard to do right now. But there's also some new therapies out there with high frequency ultrasound and other laser technologies to help try to increase blood flow and things like that in your brain and take care of things. So what do we know? 70% of us, 20% are genes, 70-80% in environment. We know the Seventh-day Adventists outlive us by 10 years on average in this country because they don't smoke, they're vegetarians, they get regular exercise, and they have great family support and psychological support. And that's what we've all had a trouble with going through the pandemic and also all the craziness in the world these days. And finally, if you look at the centenarian study of Boston University, one of the largest studies out there, very few centenarians are obese, especially men. There's no substantial smoking history. They're able to handle stress, and we can learn how to handle stress. Exercise is probably one of the best things. But read this one. Many centenarian women have a history of bearing children after the age of 35 or even 40. Our studies show that a woman who naturally has a child after the age of 40 has 4 times greater chance of making it to 100. And one of our panelists will explain why he thinks that is. The bottom line is, people, why do I want to get to 100? Well, if you're at 100 and you have the cognitive function, 15% of folks that make it there don't really have demonstrable disease. They're not as fast as they used to be, but they still do well. And super centenarians, 110, this is one of the fastest growing populations. Over 100 is now, I think, 120,000 people in the country. And it's one of the fastest growing areas. And we think there's no limit to age. I mean, Stan Moeller, who I trained of, Richard and I would have debates with him, said, 120, you can make it to 120. And we're going, okay, cool. But so I think we can go way past that now. So we're doing that in mice, 4 to 5 times their length. They're doing it with animals, primates, and there are human studies going on now. So the older you get, the sicker you get. It's not that. It's the older you get, the healthier you've been. So the sooner you understand your risk factors, the sooner you can make decisions to help get you to a wonderful, tranquil 117, and now I think the record's 122 years of age. And that's key, because this is my other hero. This is my uncle. He's 100, and he's at a Braves game about a month and a half ago. So doing the tomahawk chalk. I don't know how politically correct that is, but he's doing it. So whatever space station gets up there, and hopefully there are multiple space stations. That's the company I used to work for, and that's it. Or space cities that get built in the future, or the orbital reef that's getting built. We've got to advertise. We've got to get the word out that when you put people in this environment that you can fix them, and then we've got to translate that to the general population, because we're having a total increase in younger cancer rates. All the obesity cancers are on the increase. So precision medicine, also referred to as preventive, a lot of us are trained in that, personalized, integrated, functional lifestyle, biosystem medicine. It's all tailoring disease prevention, detection, treatment, and reversal. Considers the difference in an individual's genetics, their environment, their lifestyle, and targets treatments for the right patient at the right time, given the place they're in. So average patient, one size fits all, could be hazardous to some people, the bell-shaped curve. You need to find out what's good for that individual. And it's important for us to translate that, especially now that we've got 36 astronauts over the age of 80 and of the 27 living career astronauts. And we've got a closed-loop system up there that helps precipitate us understanding how we can control that environment so that we can help our astronauts live longer and longer, especially if they're going to Moon or Europa, which is way out there for us. And now we're going to talk about some of the best detection technologies. And now, damn it, he's finally getting to his panel. So we have a really incredible group here today, and I'm going to go through it very quickly. Bill Capp is a fellow of the American Association. He's an orthopedic surgeon, the CEO of Fountain Life. He's an Air Force flight surgeon and accomplished aviator, flew his jet here. Terry Rice is my doc. She's the Chief Medical Officer for Sutton Clinic in Houston, Texas, former medical director MD Anderson, Emergency Department, and Concourse Health at Delta Airlines. Helen Messier, MD PhD, Chief Scientist and Medical Officer at Fountain Life, Inc. Robert Harari, MD, PhD, Neurosurgeon and founder of Cellularity, Naval Aviator, co-author of Life Force, Peter Diamandis and Tony Robbins' best-selling book, which is really great to read. Peter Attia's Outlive is really excellent. And Vince Giapapa, who unfortunately, Bob is with us on camera. He got in trouble in Newark with the weather. Giapapa he's in plastic surgeon, founder of Regenerative Medicine Institute in New Jersey and Costa Rica. And Bill MacArthur, of course, we all know, is a bachelor at West Point in engineering, masters of aerospace at Georgia Tech, U.S. Naval test pilot, retired Colonel, U.S. Army, NASA astronaut, SDS 5874-92, Expedition 12 commander for 6 months. And with that, I am going to turn this over to Rich Carmona, who is the 17th U.S. Surgeon General, Distinguished Laureate of Professor, University of Arizona. And he's going to talk about our medical care system. It's sort of based on a sick healthcare model and how we need to change that. And Rich, of course, as being the 17th Surgeon General, knows something about policy. And Rich, I'm going to let you take it. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks, Smith. Thanks, Smith. And hello to all my colleagues, friends there. Sorry I couldn't be with you today, but kudos to all of you for coming together with this important meeting and the merging of space medicine with terrestrial medicine, if you will. There's a lot of positive things to be discussed here with the space folks. I guess I'm here to tell you some of the less positive and maybe challenging things that we have on Earth, recognizing that we've all profited significantly from advances in space medicine, from various digital platforms, telemedicine, a physiologic understanding of the body, and so on. But today, our big challenge is we have a sick care system, not a healthcare system. We're spending about $4.5 trillion a year, about 19% of our GDP on what we call healthcare, and it really isn't healthcare. The fact is that most of that we care for is a disease burden that is self-imposed by our poor behaviors. That is that we become sedentary, we engage in high-risk activities, and that's even people of means, because if you look across the spectrum, you look at the health disparate populations, they may not have access to the good food, access to safe places to recreate and so on, but across the spectrum, the burden in aggregate largely is preventable, and probably 75 to 80 cents of every dollar we spend on so-called healthcare in the United States is preventable. And really there is the value proposition. We're spending about $13,000 per person, and as I said, 3/4 of the expenditures are spent toward preventable diseases we cause by poor behaviors, poor behavioral choices, and even those that have poor access. There are things that can be done. However, the disease and economic burden continues. Our life expectancy has dropped 2 to 3 years in the last few years. Some of that due to COVID, but some of that also due to continued poor behavioral choices and an economic and disease burden that is really crushing us now, since we really haven't addressed those issues. Unfortunately, many of the issues before us become politicized. Adding to this burden is the fact that up until this year, right now, about 41,000 handgun deaths in the United States, and we expect that may be eclipsing 50,000 in the near future. And so all of those being preventable, and thousands of more that are injured and live but have significant disability. Again, what they have all in common is the huge disease and economic burden that is preventable in our nation. And ironically, with all of the advances in terrestrial medicine and space medicine that can move our nation forward in order that each and every one of us may live longer, younger, happier, healthier, and cheaper, the fact is that we can't really access all of that now because the burden that we have is more about preventable disease. And we keep trying to fix all of the bad decisions that are made. That's from policy down to the the individual, a lack of unity in our elected officials to be able to solve these problems, which then become politicized, from the gun issue to eating issues, food scarcity, so many issues before us that are not only national but global. But we shouldn't miss out that what you're doing today is so important, and the contributions of space medicine, which have been combined with terrestrial medicine, are significant, not only for our nation, but for the world. But an area that we really need to spend more time in now is prevention, because so much of this disease and economic burden is preventable, and it will allow us to live better, healthier, longer lives at much less cost. Smith, I'll stop with that. I know we're challenged for time, so I'll cut it short.
Thanks, Rich. That was wonderful. And our next speaker, and you're going to be able to stick around for questions. We're going to try to get through this so that we have plenty of questions, because we're going to cover a lot of interesting and controversial subjects. Our next speaker is Dr. Bill Kapp. Bill, there's your pointer.
All right, well, thank you for having me today. So it feels like I'm home. I trained at Baylor, so this is kind of nice, and my daughter went to Rice. Rich Carmona is a good friend of mine. Fountain Life's a company we started about 3 years ago, and it came together when Tony Robbins, Peter Diamandis, and Bob Hariri and I all came together kind of examining this whole idea of healthcare. I've been in healthcare for 30 years. I built hospitals, surgery centers, did orthopedics for a number of years. I have a background in molecular genetics. Realizing about 6 or 7 years ago, we are actually seeing the very first time the advent of technology to detect disease at this very earliest incipient state and reverse it, like Smith had alluded to earlier. The challenge has been the system needs a paradigm shift, because right now we practice symptom-based medicine. We're all taught it in med school. That's the basis of the differential diagnosis, and the reality is 80% of what we're treating today is chronic disease, and by definition it's not symptomatic until the disease burden is very high. So the trick is not to wait until the engine's on fire. The trick is to go upstream and find this. So find it, what your genetic predisposition is, and then also use these tools which we have historically used for detecting or diagnosing disease or confirming diagnoses, to use that on the front end to detect disease at its earliest stages. And so I'm going to show you what we've been doing at Fountain for the last 3 years. We've done about 5,000 patients so far, and we're very fortunate that our members, which is a membership model with us, have consented to this, because not only are they interested in their own health, but more importantly, they're interested in helping us move the paradigm forward. Because as Smith talked about, and Rich as well, if we don't fix this problem, there's not going to be a lot of money for a space program. There's not going to be a lot of money to take care of our elderly. And right now, we warehouse our elderly. We do not do anything to optimize their health late into life. And our one of our major advisors on our company is Dr. Eric Verdin from the Buck Institute. And he will tell you that today, with what we know today, not waiting for some new biochemical or some new procedural improvement, people can make 98 healthy. And there's really no reason that we have to, really spend the last 10 years of your life in decline. That's called the last decade. And that's what people are faced with. The NASA astronauts benefit because they have great surveillance. And the reality is most of us don't have that surveillance. And so when we start looking at this on a long-term basis, how do we improve that? Because not only will this erode our budget, it will erode, we don't have enough young people to take care of us all in the old age, and so nobody's going to work in a nursing home if they can work for Apple. Okay, so once again, it's a little self-centered. I'm 62. I would like to not have to be debilitated at the end of my life, so I want to find out problems early. And in my aviation background, that's what we do. That's what you guys do in the space program as well. You detect problems before they become a problem and you avoid them in the first place. But we don't do that in healthcare. So how do we do this at Fountain? We started with this idea, how do we fully quantify somebody? So we collect 150 gigabytes of data on you. We do a full body and brain MRI with AI overlays. We do the coronary CT angiography, which we've been doing for about 3 years. There's lots of AI overlays we could do. We could talk about those. We obviously do the DEXA, which you guys do, echocardiogram, low-dose CT, and then we do cancer screening as well, and we'll talk about how we do that. Retinal scan for AI reads, not only for looking for diabetic retinopathy, things like that, but also looking at, there's a whole host of things you can diagnose in the back of the eye with artificial intelligence now. And so this is yielding to the field of computers and machine learning, and we're going to see a lot more of this in the next couple of years. So once we get your upload, your imaging, then we want to look at your genomics. We do entire whole genome sequence. We do early cancer detection. We like the GRAIL test and a lot of these other new tests that detect small DNA fragments in your bloodstream. But the reality is they're not very sensitive. But when we marry that with whole body MRI, we get a sensitivity in the 90s and a specificity in the 90s. We also do very comprehensive blood biomarkers that are not normally done. We do metabolomics, which most people don't do. Gut, particularly microbiome. Microbiome has a huge impact on your health, so we know about your oral microbiome and your gut microbiome. Toxin assessments, as Smith alluded to, we've got more and more toxins in the environment. Anything in the environment we have to be able to measure better. And right now, 95% of what we call healthcare happens outside the doctor's office. So how are we going to start measuring that so that we can start to manage that? We also do look at, obviously, comprehensive nutritional arrangement, and then we look at your epigenetic age. And this is a way to look at methylation patterns, determine how your physiologic age correlates with your chronologic age. And fundamentally, though, we use a systems biology approach. Now, this field is called functional medicine, which means instead of looking at symptom-based medicine, which we've done over the last 150 years, we're really good. We broke the body up into lots of pieces. Everybody got a piece. I got my piece. The heart guys got their piece. But there's nobody really quarterbacking the situation anymore. So the point is, how do we collect all this data into one location? And it turns out the best people to do that are actually functional medicine trained physicians, because they're trained in cellular biology. What is the root cause? We do this in aviation with root cause analysis all the time. We really don't do it in medicine. Usually if you have a heart attack, or something happens to you, we basically fix the problem. We put the stent in, and maybe we give you a little bit of baseline advice, but we really don't do that deep dive to find out why did you have that problem. Very deep dive. Was it a toxin issue that caused a problem? And Dr. Messier will speak about that, because there's lots of things we can do. And then we look at your functional performance. We look at neurocog function, balance tracker, grip strength, all the things that kind of give us this comprehensive assessment. We collect this 150 gigabytes of data, we put it in a very large data algorithm, and then we create a digital twin of you. So we're not looking for population-based solutions, because right now, quite frankly, they're not really working here in the United States. They can, but they haven't worked very well, and there's lots of reasons which Rich alluded to. But we believe that if we can show our clients, and this is our data, when we show our clients what's going on in their body, we elicit behavioral change, which is actually the hardest part. And we'll talk about how we're going to democratize this as well. So, we look at liver images, obviously. We do a lot on our liver images, looking at, obviously, elevated liver fat, things of this nature, detailed muscle composition. Other things we do is the Clearly test, which Smith talks about, and I'll show you a few other photos. It's interesting, 70% of people who have a heart attack will never have a symptom prior to having a heart attack. And 70% of people who die from cancer today die from a cancer we do not have a screening test for. So the point is, how good are we at prevention? And it turns out we rely on a 200-year-old physical exam with tools from 200 years ago. The stethoscope was invented in 1817. I think we can do better, and I think the technology is there now to do better, and we can get these scan times down and the technology, and I'll talk to you, I'm happy to discuss that later. But the point is, we've got to get better. And by the way, 2 years ago, the World Health Organization came out with a big study, and it said all the things we've done in cardiac health have made no difference in the number of people having heart attacks or dying, or dying of heart attacks. So we're really not making, and statins aren't moving the needle, right? Because we're not doing a root cause analysis to find out exactly what the problem is. We have patients today with really high cholesterol and a very clear cardiac panel. We have 28-year-olds that walk in with no family history running marathons, and they got a 70% lesion. How do we measure that, right? Well, it turns out we can't use population-based medicine. We've got to use better tools. So this is kind of what Smith showed you. What I like is you get a reversible plaque score, and we can show 40, in most of our clients, we see a 40% plaque reversal when we put them on a program from 9 to 12 months. And that involves a lot of different things, but it's really a root cause analysis, and then using everything from, diet, exercise, and certainly pharmaceuticals when required as well. So I'll show you this video, because I think it's interesting if it'll play. See if I can get it to play. So this is the Clearly test, and I'll just show you what this looks like. We can actually fly down your artery and show you where the plaque is, which is very helpful when you're talking to patients, because patients will, if I just tell you to take a statin, that's one thing. If I actually show you what your coronaries look like, it's a little different. So the top is where we're actually flying down and we can do this with machine learning, and it'll actually track as we go down the artery, and that kind of is a quick, brief view, but you can see, like Smith talked about, the atheroma is actually eccentric, right? And it's not necessarily, it doesn't come in concentrically. Matter of fact, most of the atheroma happens on the outside of the vessel, and we're really excited. This is great technology, it's 2 years old, but we just saw technology that'll be released shortly. We can actually now show you the inflammation in the wall of the vessel as well with AI. So what does that mean? That means that once we can identify the problem, we can attack it a lot better, and it's very good at teaching patients. So we do an early cancer detection. This is what we do. Obviously, the GRAIL test, a lot of you know about this. It's a great test for bloodborne diseases. It's not very good if you don't have very good blood supply. But if you do whole body MRI, we get a combination therapy, and I'll show you our data here shortly. Obviously, do cancer screening. CT, low-dose CT is really pretty much the gold standard for this. And then we really look heavily at brain health, because we find that with some of the AI overlays that we can use now, particularly BrainKey, which is the one we're mainly using, we can tell you what your brain age is. And that's really important because you want to know what you can do to improve it. Neuroplasticity is real. You can improve your brain volume. You can improve the number of synapses in your brain. Exercise is still the primary modality for that. Muscle mass is critical. You have to have muscle mass, not for just locomotion and skeletal performance, but you need muscle mass for cognitive function as much as anything else. So we could talk a little bit about that. We want to, not only do we know what your brain volume is, but we may be able to tell you what your hippocampal occupancy score is, because that's kind of where we start working with areas of dementia. And even in Parkinson's, you have to lose 75% of the cells in the substantia nigra to get a symptom in the first place. So wouldn't you like to know, like well before you ever elicit a symptom, you'd like to know these problems. And just like we do in aviation, we want to know what the problem is before we leave the ground. And we don't do that very well, obviously, in healthcare. So we look at, and also this other thing that gives us really great overlay, looking at perivascular spaces, and this is really the area around the vessels in the brain, and these are really predictive of a lot of issues very early. And then in addition to that, which I talked about earlier, we look at your hippocampal volume. We can kind of tell you where you are and where you stratify, and then you show you how you can improve that. Neurocog testing, I'm sure you guys do this. This is very important for us, but it's the overlay of these imaging technologies with standard testing as well, which are giving us new insights. And then obviously pulse wave analysis. I'm just showing you a handful of the tests that we currently do. We also do genomics, and it's important, you know, genes aren't destiny, but they do sometimes point you in the right direction. And you want to know, do you have a propensity? So we use polygenic risk scores. We look at hypertension, and this is just an example, but there are lots of things we look at. We do an entire whole genome sequence on you. And then we have a data platform that can absorb an entire whole genome sequence, as well as all your MRs. All the omics data that you have, we can put in one combination data platform, along with your environmental data as well. And then we look at your bone health, obviously metabolic health. We do DEXA scans, but we also like the MR for this as well, because this gives us really great muscle data, really great data around visceral fat, and then we can start to show people how they can improve over time. And that's the DEXA. You guys are familiar with some of these. And then once again, using osteoporosis for polygenic risk scores, so that we can pre-identify people long before they develop problems. The AI scan, which we talked about for the diabetic retinopathy, I mean, this is really going to be point-of-care testing in the future. We do it in every one of our centers. We're doing it everywhere. It's going to be like a blood pressure cuff before long, because it's a very easy way to detect disease while it's asymptomatic. And this is our data, so I'm going to walk you through why we're doing this. So we're trying to address the overall healthcare problem, and how do we do this at a precision medicine level. And these are just some of our findings, okay? We did this is over 1,000 of our members that have been through the process. And I can tell you that almost everybody walks in through our door thinks they're healthy, okay? And almost everybody who walks in our door does not come in necessarily with a chronic disease problem. But we find that none of us are as healthy as we think we are, because our body is really good at masking disease, okay? It's really good. And by the way, if your doctor tells you had a clean bill of health, he doesn't know what the plaque is in your arteries, because you can't hear it with a stethoscope, right? You need an advanced tool to be able to do that. And I know the testing is expensive, and we'll talk about how we're reducing that. But this is some of our early results. But overall, 14% of people who walk in our doors, we find a clinically actionable finding that needs to be addressed almost right away. That may be cardiac, it may be cancer. We have 2% of the people have cancer that we detect routinely. 2.5% have aneurysms. 14% have elevated liver fat, number one cause of liver transplant in the United States today. 21% of our patients have coronary plaque. They may be a little healthier than the average, but when I say coronary, this is significant coronary that we would say that's 40% or greater when we're looking at lesions. And then 40% are pre-diabetic or diabetic. Most people are unaware of this. The other problem is our normals have gotten skewed. So if you have a fasting blood sugar of 95, you have about a 60% chance of being a full-blown diabetic in 10 years. Because what's happened is the normals are the normals for the general population. And as the population has gotten sicker, we've skewed the numbers, okay? So what you want to know is what is your personal data cloud for optimal health? And you can't do that unless we actually create that for you. So why did we do this? Because our hypothesis was that if we could catch things early, we could significantly lower the cost of care. And that is exactly what we've proven in our first 1,000 clients. And by the time we detect disease early versus when it would normally be symptomatic and found, we can reduce healthcare costs by 80 to 90%. That changes the entire dynamic of what we're doing in healthcare today. But once again, the problem is the system is misaligned with incentives, because nobody makes more money, or nobody makes money unless you're sick or unless you become sicker, right? And you don't show up in the doctor unless you have a symptom. Now, some people will go get a preventive medicine screening. You guys do a great job of that with the Astronaut Corps and your ACMED program here, but that's not the norm, because you have to have a behavioral motivator to get them to do this. And so this is my last slide, but I just will tell you that there are so many opportunities to be able to get this technology out, and what we're finding is we can actually embed this technology outside the doctor's office. So we're actually working now to embed this in resorts, embed this type of technology in communities where the point of access becomes much, much easier. So you move into a wellness community and you get your screening as part of your HOA, right? And the cost of the screens are coming down. Whole body MRI is down to about $500. You can get your cardiac scan done for about $250 with an AI overlay. Maybe that's $500. My point is we've got to be able to repurpose dollars that we're currently spending on sick care, and we've got to get in the front of the curve on this. So that's all I have. I appreciate that, and I think turn it back to Smith.
Thank you. Thanks, Bill. That was wonderful. Our next speaker will be Terry Rice, who is as I said earlier, the CMO of Sutton Healthcare Clinic here in Houston, and she's my doctor, so she's got her hands full.
Hi, I'm just a clinician, and I have had the pleasure of taking care of Smith, and have a couple of patients here in the room today. Sydenham Clinic is not like Fountain Life, but we do some things that are similar to it. We take a holistic approach to healthcare using functional medicine, precision medicine, and try to look at our patients in all the important aspects of their health. So we do what we call genomics-based primary care. When our patients come in, we do an in-depth evaluation of them. We look at their genomics. We look at 800 different variations at a baseline of their genomics in 33 different categories. So we're able to look at cognition, heart disease, risk for ischemia, stroke, atrial fibrillation, clotting, osteoporosis, et cetera. We also do a full analysis of patients' nutrition. So we look at all of their vitamins, omega-3, 6, and 9, amino acids, and then toxins. We also go and look at patients' allergy sensitivities to food, as well as fecal microbiome testing. We have a nutritionist on site who helps us with our patients, because everybody knows that America is drowning in carbohydrates. Everyone gets an Oura ring, so we look at sleep, and then we also do a functional movement screen on all of our patients. We do a lot of hormonal analysis and hormone replacement therapy, so we just try to improve patients' health overall. So I wanted to just give a little bit of a case study about how we are practicing in this space between what I was taught in medical school, what the insurance companies pay for, and what we can really do to improve our patients' health. And one of the things I wanted to feature in this talk was a little bit about how genomics are helping me keep my patients healthier and alerting me to the things, and alerting them to the things that they should be concerned about and are not really aware of. So this is a patient who is a 47-year-old man who came in to see me about a year ago. And he had an elevated CT calcium score of 800, over 800. He was chronically inflamed with a long history of eczema and asthma. He was already on testosterone. He was already on a statin. He had had obesity, which had been reversed by the time he came to see me. He had lost 30 pounds on Manjaro. And he had a strong history of environmental allergies and some memory concerns. And he came to me and he said, I want a Clearly. So Clearly is what all these pictures are. We've been showing you of the coronary arteries. And as far as I know, we're the only provider in Houston doing Clearlys. And it's interesting because when I send these patients to the cardiologists, they've never heard of them. But we're getting there. They've heard of them now because I've sent enough patients that they've had to look it up and figure out what's going on here. So this gentleman's family history, he had a family history of myocardial infarction, stroke, Hashimoto's, dementia, and he was on Manjaro, rosuvastatin, ramipril for his blood pressure, and albuterol for his asthma. So he's already in pretty good shape when he came to see me. His LDL cholesterol was 51, ApoB was within normal range, CRP wasn't bad, homocysteine was already controlled, he was on a bunch of supplements, uric acid wasn't too bad, insulin was low, he obviously, on Manjaro, that's really low insulin, so he was no longer overweight. He exercised regularly, used weights and aerobics. His diet for a long time had been emphasis on fish, vegetables. He was avoiding red meat, low-carb diet, gluten-free, low sugar. He was a never smoker. He had an occasional glass of wine. He had a high-profile job, stressed there, and happily married. And he's like, why do I have these issues? Why is my CT calcium score over 100, over 800, I'm sorry. So as part of our evaluation, we do a nutritional evaluation. We use a tool by Genova called NutriVal, and this looks at all your vitamins, like I said, your amino acids, your omega-3, 6, and 9. But in this gentleman, what was most interesting is something that I find very frequently, unfortunately in our patients that are trying to be very healthy and eating a lot of fish, is his mercury was pretty high at almost 24. Mine was high, yours was high. We're like, oh my God. So unfortunately, all fish has mercury in it. And the apex predators, though, are the worst. And so salmon is not bad, which we're all trying to eat a lot of, right? The smashed fish tend to be small: salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, herring. Everyone just kind of goes, when I say, eat those. Everybody loves the tuna, and they're all eating sushi, right? Well, it's loaded with mercury, unfortunately. And many people are susceptible to mercury and have problems getting rid of mercury in their system. So one of the things with mercury, how we get mercury out of our body is the cells move it into our bloodstream, goes into our liver, goes into our bile, it's excreted into our gut, where about 98% of it is reabsorbed, and it just cycles around and around. Mercury causes chronic inflammation, interferes with your ability to use your nutrient elements, and it's also a neurotoxin. So for this gentleman, just jumping ahead, we actually used a supplement called PectaClear, which is a combination of citrus fruit pectin and algae. And I would say about 95% of my patients with 2 or 3 months on PectaClear, the mercury drops down to normal. If your mercury level is 9 or 8 or not that bad, usually you can just get off the tuna and the apex predator fish for 3 to 6 months, and it will come down. One caveat is if you have it in your teeth, which many of us still do, in our fillings, that's a problem because you're constantly inhaling and swallowing it. He was in pretty good shape. He was already on omega-3s when he came to see me. So this is omega-3 index. This is the percentage of omega-3s in a red blood cell membrane. I'm sure you guys know all about fish oil and omega-3s, but omega-3s are important for vascular health. They reduce inflammation. They reduce your risk of blood clotting. Probably most importantly is the effect they have on our brain and the neurons in our brain, because omega-3s are more pliable. They make it for a softer cellular membrane, whereas omega-6s are much more stiff and less pliable. And there have been studies shown, functional CT scans, MRIs shown that brain function is actually improved with adequate amounts of omega-3s. So we supplement pretty much everybody with omega-3s. I don't know if you all are familiar with, there's a lot of physicians here, but we did look at this gentleman's Boston Heart, was part of the Boston Heart studies they do. It's called cholesterol balance. So it tells us, how is he getting his cholesterol? Is he making it or is he absorbing it? And these last two, the bottom two bars here, are absorption markers. And so he is a high absorber of cholesterol. So a good choice for him besides Crestor would be Zetia, which blocks the absorption of cholesterol from the GI tract. But then while we were trying to get his clearly, which was a real problem because he had a rapid heart rate and we couldn't get his heart rate down low enough to get it done where we usually do the scans, so there was a significant delay, we had his genomics results come back. And this gentleman had ApoE4. Are you all familiar with this? It's been talked about so much. Everybody's like, yes, yes. So ApoE4 is a lipoprotein present in about 26% of the population. And ApoE4 has to do with the transportation of lipids and cholesterol, but particularly in the central nervous system. But it's also pro-inflammatory. And it also, people that have ApoE4 really hold on to mercury. It's hard to get the mercury out of their system as well. So it's a significant risk factor for cognitive decline, but in my practice, I've found over and over again that it's a huge risk factor for cardiovascular disease. This is just more about it's, and then this is actually some recommendations from this genetic tool that we use about how to treat people, supplements, lifestyle, et cetera, that carry ApoE4. He also had a homozygous SNP for interleukin-1 beta, which may be part of the reason why he has so much problems with inflammation, asthma, et cetera. But it's also a risk factor for cardiovascular disease because, as we know, atherosclerosis is an inflammatory process. And this list of supplements here, this resveratrol is, I think resveratrol, Resolvins, I'm sorry. Resolvins SPMs is listed first here. This is distilled from fish oil, so this is the anti-inflammatory aspect of fish oil. Sulforaphane is from broccoli sprouts. EPA, we all know, is from fish oil. Pterostilbene is from blueberries. And then, of course, resveratrol are some recommendations to help lower the inflammation. Interestingly enough, he had 2 copies of another SNP for BCHE, which is very common in people who have ApoE4. And people that have the BCHE SNP cannot tolerate succinylcholine, which is a paralyzing agent that's been used in anesthesia a lot. And this is why often people who have dementia over the age of 60, if they have surgery and they get succinylcholine, they will have a permanent cognitive decline afterwards. So these are good things to know about yourself before you go into the OR. So this is an interesting case. The reason I wanted to talk about him is because the patient came to me first, so he is our kind of index case here. And then he sent his dad to me because his dad had a lot of fatigue. So his father came in to see me, and it turned out that his fatigue was most likely due to his atrial fibrillation, which was uncontrolled, and was bothering him a lot and keeping him awake at night. He could feel his heart pounding. So this is a cortisol awakening response. I don't know if y'all have ever seen this, but normal between these black lines here. So you get up in the morning and your cortisol goes up, and then it gradually comes down throughout the day. Well, he was awakening with a very high cortisol level because he wasn't sleeping well because of this atrial fib with rapid ventricular rate. But we did his genetics as well, worked on the dad, and we did his genetics as well, and we looked at his heart. His heart was worked up by multiple physicians. He didn't have any atherosclerosis. And every time he would come in the office, he would come in with his wife. And his wife, they were just like a couple of lovebirds. They were the cutest couple in their 70s. And she was a very thin woman, a yoga instructor. And every time he'd come in, they would spend 20 minutes. He would spend 20 minutes telling me what incredible shape his wife was in. She was thin. She had incredible metabolism. She was so strong. She was doing yoga. And she was a lovely woman. But I finally looked at him and said, your son has ApoE4. Okay. You don't. I think we ought to get your wife looked at. Okay. So he agreed to have her join us as a patient. So in the interim period, we sent our original patient off to get his clearly. We finally had to do it through a hospital. And he had a CT angiography. And the radiologist called the cardiologist that I had to send him to get it done and said, oh my God, it's really tight between the left main and the LAD. You need to get this guy cathed. But in the interim period, we were cooking to clearly, and it showed that really it wasn't all that tight. So you've been looking at these earlier, but here's his proximal LAD is 50%, but not really something you would stent. And then he has some other disease in some of his other arteries. And here's a picture of the clearly. And it was an interesting case because it was right at the takeoff between the left main and the LAD. So they couldn't, they were concerned they wouldn't be able to stent it because they would occlude the circumflex if they stented the LAD from the left main. But he finally went to the cath lab, and the cath lab actually showed it was only 50%, and the clearly was more accurate than the CT angio. So the great thing about Clearly to me also, and I'm not here to do a Clearly commercial, but it is a tool that we have that's kind of new to us, is that you can look at what the plaque is made of. Is it calcium? Is it cholesterol? Is it very soft plaque? Is it ready to rupture? And then you can see it change if you're trying to have disease, if you're treating aggressively and you want to have the disease improve or regress. Previously, we didn't really have any way of doing that. You can send someone to the cath lab, give them all the dye, go in through their groin, but you really still didn't know whether plaque was maturing or if it was cholesterol. So this is, I think, a huge advance in medical care, really. I'm very, very impressed with it. So currently, this gentleman is on Crestor. We added colchicine, which was just FDA approved because I think the FDA is now finally, and the AHA has probably tipped their hat to the fact that inflammation is the underlying cause of heart disease. And then he is on a PCSK9 inhibitor, Repatha, and we have him on Zetia and tirzepatide. And now, that's his Mounjaro. And now his LDL cholesterol is, the last time we checked it, it was 17. So I see vascular disease as not just the bad things that we do to our blood vessels, the fluctuating blood sugar, the smoke, the pollution, the alcohol, whatever else that we do, high saturated fat diets, but it's also maybe a deficiency of things that we need to feed that endothelium, the lining of our blood vessels. So in these patients, we do things also that may be a little woo-woo, but there's some good science behind them. So we also put this gentleman on bergamot, which has been shown to reduce LDL level and increase particle size. Pomegranate extract, because of its high concentration of polyphenols. NAD, we actually do an NAD test to see your levels. There's a specialty lab for that. His NAD was very low, and we put him on NAD. Ubiquinol, CoQ10, because he's on a statin. Pure Genomics Ultra Multivitamin is, everyone should be on B vitamins. We know this is important for brain health. There's been lots of trials that have shown that. This particular one has a small amount of lithium in it, which has also been shown to be neuroprotective. K2, because it helps with arterial calcification, and then the SPMs, which are from the fish oil, and of course he is on krill oil also, which is another way to get fish oil into people, but there's some literature that shows that krill maybe actually absorb better in patients with ApoE4. A lot of people don't want to take many supplements. Some people are ready to take a grocery bag full. This gentleman is like, bring it on, I'll take whatever you have. So he was also on Brain Vital, which has choline in it, whole coffee fruit extract, which increases your BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is low in people with ApoE4, and phosphatidylserine for membranes. Prelox, which is actually called Prelox Enhanced Sex for Men, but really we were using the Prelox because the Icarins help prevent the white blood cells from sticking to the walls of the arteries. Arginine, which increases your nitric oxide, very important for vascular health, and pycnogenol, which is both an anticoagulant and increases nitric oxide. So bad allergies, quercetin is a mast cell stabilizer. We talked about the Pectaclear for the mercury, and then magnesium 3 and 8, because we all need magnesium, and that is one of the formulations that crosses the blood-brain barrier. Let me know when it's time. We good?
Yeah.
Keep going or end?
Just soon.
Okay, soon.
It's great. It's great. How much time do we have, Richard?
Where's Richard? Okay, so we're gonna tie it up.
That's your job, Smith.
Okay, so we're gonna tie it up here with this patient. But it was interesting. I did see his mother, and she did become a patient. And when I first did her labs, her LDL cholesterol was 249. At which point the husband could not believe it, and he said, I think it's because she's been taking biotin. Would you repeat it? So we repeated the test when she was off the biotin, and it was 250. And so we got her started, got her doing a CT calcium score. She's doing her clearly this week. Sent her off to have her carotids looked at. She had a right carotid bruit. She has a sister with dementia, unfortunately. And unfortunately, her genetics just came back this week, and we found out that she has 2 copies of ApoE4, which in women means across the board, and maybe not in someone as healthy as she is, that she has an over 60% chance of developing dementia. So I just feel like in the last few years, when I've been starting to practice in this realm, that we've really been able to find a lot of things in our patients that they don't expect, and really been able to help families and see things more clearly.
Thank you. That was wonderful. And it's been a big help to me, that's for sure. Our next speaker is Helen Messier. Helen, MD, PhD.
All right. I will try to be quick, but it's such a pleasure and honor to be here with you today. Thank you, Smith, for organizing all this. I want to kind of take a step back. You've heard about a lot of the really importance of finding things early. But I want to even go earlier than finding disease. What happens that leads to disease in the first place? And now, if we think about chronic disease, it's clear that aging is the biggest risk factor for chronic disease. As we get older, our chances of getting one of these diseases goes up significantly. And the interesting thing is that space travel is also a risk factor for chronic disease, right? So is space travel actually accelerating our chances of getting these chronic diseases? And I want to walk you through just a few examples very quickly of how space travel can replicate the aging process and really dive into some of those hallmarks of aging. And if we address those, we can actually start to move the needle all the way to that left side. So think of this health disease continuum, right? On the left side is optimal wellness. That's when we feel good, we can do anything, everything is working perfectly. Over time, because life isn't always easy on us, you either go up into space, or you don't eat right, or you don't sleep well, or you're under stress, we start to get these imbalances. Now we can start to look at those imbalances using a systems biology approach, looking at what are the biochemical pathways going on in our body, what is our genetic predisposition, which you heard a little bit about so nicely. Looking at that, we know we develop these imbalances, and over time they become dysfunctions. So when there are imbalances, we don't know them. We're asymptomatic. We don't feel them, right? Our body's really good at hiding a lot of things, as you heard. But over time, we start to get symptoms. Now, when you get those symptoms, typically in our regular system, what do? We use symptom suppression, right? If it's pain, we take a painkiller. But we don't actually go and look at what's the underlying reason for that. What are those underlying clinical imbalances that actually lead to that symptom in the first place? And so over time, of course, if we don't do that, leads to disease, disintegration, and death. So we have an opportunity here, if we really focus at this level, these core clinical imbalances, to be able to actually both reverse disease, and this is really critical, and you've heard about reversal of plaque already. How do we reverse chronic disease? Absolutely possible, and prevent disease. So really the whole importance of that is focusing on that front end using a systems biology approach. So really, you've heard a bit about this already. Systems biology is not looking at things separately. It's looking at the whole together, because one cell, our liver doesn't function separately from our heart, which doesn't function separately from our brain. It all connects together, and so we have to think of it as a system. This is big data. This is a lot of data. When you start doing genomics, metabolomics, proteomics, that requires computation. That requires us to use a platform and really bring a lot of different specialties and different areas of science together to be able to do that. So really, this is root cause medicine. You've heard systems biology, functional medicine. The idea is looking at the root cause. So if we think of ourselves as a tree, the leaves of the tree are our symptoms. what we're used to, all of us physicians in the room have been trained in an organ system diagnosis perspective. So each branch is an organ system, your hepatology, dermatology, cardiology, that results in green leaves or not. But we have to remember that those leaves are connected by a trunk, and that trunk, you think of those as different dysfunctions. So Dr. Rice talked about toxicity, inflammation, mitochondrial dysfunction, the little power plants of our cell, hormone imbalances, oxidative stress, all those things eventually lead to green, healthy leaves or not. Again, in our system, you got a yellow leaf, what do? We get the green paint and we paint it green, right? What we have to do is start looking deeper at the trunk and then think of the roots of the tree as our genetics. And our genetics interact with our environment, right? So everybody's unique and nobody thrives in the exact same environment. And so I want to sort of use this example that you've heard a few times now as a way of looking at root cause. So you've heard about inflammation, you've heard about cholesterol, but there's another thing that's even deeper inside lining every single blood vessel in all mammals in our human body is a glycocalyx. So we call that the endothelial glycocalyx. It's a glycan layer, a very complex layer of proteoglycans, glycosaminoglycans that extend from that single cell endothelial layer, and it really acts like a Teflon coating of our arteries. That's really the fundamental thing, that when that gets degraded, that allows the LDL plaque, the ApoB, to enter into the wall of the artery and start the whole process of atherosclerosis. So we now have the opportunity to actually address the root cause. What's one of the things that breaks down this glycan layer? It's sugar. So when we have high blood sugar breaks that down. What's another thing is high stress. So when there's a lot of turbulence in our blood flow, that can also break down that layer. And so what can we do about it? Well, one of the things we can do is actually take sulfated polysaccharides. There's some great examples of regenerating that layer using seaweed. Seaweed is filled with sulfated polysaccharides. So, really, we think of us in the middle, right? We're a combination of our genes interacting with our environment. And so it's important to understand our genes and then create the right environment for that. And so, of course, health is a product of the genes. So depending on what environment you get into, that can change a lot. And so I want to very briefly touch on, I know we don't have a lot of time, so just stop me when I need to stop. Is this concept of the hallmarks of aging. Who's heard of the hallmarks of aging? Just put up your hand. So some of you have. So this was a paper published in Cell in 2013 that really looked at what are the fundamental changes that happen at the level of the cell that actually lead to the process of aging. Okay, there was a number of them that were published in that initial paper, and since then, other hallmarks have been added to it. And you can see them here. One of the hallmarks is genomic instability, right? As we start to get mutations in our DNA, as our DNA gets damaged, and we're not as good at repairing it as we get older, we don't have the cofactors for the enzymes that repair it. That goes down as we age. That can result in mutations and result in, obviously, aging and the cell breaking down. Telomeres, epigenetics. So I'm going to go through this. This is just a list of those hallmarks of aging. And I've highlighted in yellow some of the things we know that happen during spaceflight. These changes happen, which is probably one of the reasons why we get accelerated aging. And now, when we get back to Earth, we know that some of these do improve, but it's really important to start to look at all of these. And so these are some of the ones that have been added since that first 2013 paper. Disruption of circadian rhythms. That's a big driver of aging and chronic disease, and it's something we have to be really cognizant of. So really, epigenetics, again, who's heard of epigenetics? I don't want to repeat things, yeah. So the twin study was great at looking at what are the methylation changes. So epigenetics is really just how we control which genes are expressed. That's controlled by these little methylation tags that get added to our DNA, as well as how the DNA is wrapped around histones that either open it up or close it off to being read and expressed and turned into a protein. And we know that as we get older, there's this global hypomethylation that happens, but certain areas get hypermethylated. And we know there's a lot of changes, again, as we get into space, that there's a lot of these methylation changes. So a lot of things can affect the methylation. One of the things is stress, but the good news is that when there's significant stress, this was one during COVID-19, we saw increased methylation of biological age that recovered once the stress went away. So that's good news. So these are all factors that can affect your epigenome. All of these lifestyles, remember, it's a combination of our genes interacting with our lifestyle. The good news, again, is that we can start to do interventions. This was a really, made a lot of headlines, the TRIM trial, that actually was the first time that we showed that we can reverse epigenetic age in humans. And they used a combination of growth hormone, DHEA, and metformin. That wouldn't be what I would choose, but what's really important is that it showed that we can reverse that age. This was another study that showed we can reverse epigenetic age using lifestyle interventions, using green leafy vegetables, methylation cofactors. So there's so much that can be done. You know, we know that calorie restriction can actually improve our epigenetics. Another one is genomic instability. I want to talk a little bit about, you know, when we get radiated, that's a great way of breaking our genes, right? Our DNA gets damaged a lot during radiation. We have the ability to repair them using these different repair enzymes. But the cofactors for a lot of these repair enzymes, like the sirtuins, are NAD. So NAD goes down as we get older. So these are things that are really easy, low-hanging fruit that we can do, maintain our NAD levels as we get older to help, you know, our DNA repair enzymes work. And so these are other things that cause it. One of the things I wanted to just bring up, because we were talking about it yesterday with Smith, is what are we doing to protect our DNA? There's things available now, and this was a study done in rats. A lot of these studies are done in rats, but this is a very safe supplement, alpha lipoic acid. Alpha lipoic acid overall was shown that has a neuroprotective activity against oxidative stress induced by radiation. Now this is really promising. This is being discussed on how do we protect people when they go through CT scanners or get radiological radiation, but we should be looking at things like this to protect our people being exposed to high doses of radiation. It's very, very safe. Our body makes it itself, so there's really no downside, and we're going to get more and more understanding of how that can work. I'm going to go through this quickly. Another hallmark of aging is mitochondrial dysfunction. This is a really important one because mitochondria, of course, are the power plants of our cell. They're what take the food we eat, the oxygen we breathe, and turn it into energy. Now, it turns out that when you have dysfunctional mitochondria, that is linked to almost all of the other hallmarks. So dysfunctional mitochondria is linked to a lot of different diseases as well. And so all these hallmarks of aging are all linked to mitochondrial dysfunction. And of course, the problem is these mitochondria make free radicals when they work. And so the free radicals damage the mitochondria. It's sort of a vicious circle. You need really efficient ones. You need enough antioxidants to mop up that damage. And so again, all of these plus many more diseases are associated when we don't have functioning mitochondria. Neurological diseases, very specifically, cancer. We all have heard of the Warburg effect. Cancer is really a mitochondrial disease. And so these reactive oxygen species cause that. We can do some really interesting things to help. One of the things, and I did this one just for Dr. Kapp, he loves it, sulforaphane. You heard Dr. Rice talk about sulforaphane. We know that sulforaphane, which is found in cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, can actually activate the transcription of this protein, which is called NRF2. NRF2 is a transcription factor that binds the DNA elements, all of our antioxidant genes. So when we eat broccoli, we're turning on all our endogenous antioxidant capabilities, which is amazing. So these are really things that aren't in our RDA, right? We don't have an RDA for sulforaphane, but these are really important components of our diet and nutrition that really help us maintain our health. Another thing you can do to really maintain mitochondrial function is zone 2 training. So we should be looking at how do we train astronauts as well. Zone 2 is that place where we switch from burning oxygen and fat to burning sugar without oxygen. That's the point where we do that switchover. If we train right at that level, that's a trigger for our mitochondria to become more efficient and to replicate, so we make more mitochondria. And again, this is the zone 2 training. We can also do other supplements that can help with mitochondrial function. Glutathione being one of them, because glutathione is one of those major antioxidants that mop up the free radicals. We make glutathione, but we need the precursors to make glutathione. One of those is sulfated amino acids like cysteine. That's one of the rate limiting steps to glutathione production. And so it becomes this vicious circle when we don't make enough and we use it up, and now we get more mitochondrial damage. I'm not going to go into this, but I want to set the stage for Dr. Harari, who you're going to hear next, in talking about stem cell exhaustion. So decrease in stem cells is another hallmark of aging. We lose our number of stem cells as we get older. Of course, a stem cell is that cell that can turn into any other tissue type in our body. And so those are what we need to repair damage. We need those to really stay healthy. And as we get older, we know that, babies that are born have a lot of stem cells. And as we get older, we really have far fewer. So what are some of the things? I'm going to skip inflammation because that's huge. Gut microbiome, we know that that's another new hallmark of aging, is an imbalance in our gut microbes, those trillions of microorganisms that live in our GI tract. That's huge. And why is that important? Because those little bacteria are actually connected to every other organ in our body. And they play a role, and there's this two-way feedback mechanism with all of those. And as we get older, our microbiome changes. And this is what happens when cells get damaged. They either die, they can go through apoptosis, but they can also get damaged and become senescent. We call these our zombie cells, right? These are the cells that it's not safe. If you have DNA mutations, it's not safe for that cell to keep dividing because that can turn into a cancerous cell. So what these cells do is they become senescent. They don't divide, but they kind of sit there and they secrete all of these inflammatory molecules, what we call SASP, or senescent associated secretory phenotype. And those cause a lot of inflammation in the body. Now, senescence protects us. It protects us from cancer, but it also leads to aging. I'm going to
Will you wrap it up?
Yep, you got it. Okay, and so the good thing is there's lots we can do about getting rid of the senescence. And there's this, okay, and the last thing I want to really just touch on, and we can go into the Q&A about this after, is this idea of what are some of the innovative things we can do to really reverse this aging process. And one of them, it comes from these parabiosis experiments, where you took an old mouse, a young mouse, you stitched their circulatory systems together, and the old mouse became young. It kind of rejuvenated that old mouse. So this was the whole concept of young blood. It turns out that it's actually, we can do this in humans. We've been doing it for years. It's called plasmapheresis. We take your blood, we separate out the cells. Basically, it's an oil change for your blood, right? We remove the plasma and some of the whatever negative factors are in that plasma, and then replace the cells. There's been a number of human studies. One that was a groundbreaking study that showed it reversed cognitive impairment by using plasmapheresis, and these are the numbers there. And then a new one showing that your CRP, or inflammatory markers, went way down, and that it rejuvenated hippocampal volume, it rejuvenated muscle, liver, and brain, and so this is really promising. So I'm going to stop there, and we can open for questions.
I think we'll hold the questions till later, and thank you so much, Helen. That was wonderful. I think we're getting close on time. Hey,
I'm
Bob,
ready
good
to
see
go.
you. Take off.
I'm ready to go, Smith. All right, man. Thanks. Really appreciate it. I'm going to try and share my my slides here. Let me know that that you got them. Did that pop up?
There you go.
All right. In the hopefully this will play in the immortal words of.
I'm gonna have to science the shit out of this.
So, arguably, this guy's my idol because there's no doubt that we had an opportunity to do exactly that in the world of regenerative and cellular medicine. The setup that I've been given by the previous speakers is great. I want to talk to you about some tools that I think will be incredibly valuable to preserve the health and performance of everybody, but in particular those of us who are exposed to things that accelerate our aging. You know, 27 weeks in Meridian, Mississippi got me thinking that if only we could have the equivalent of an aircraft AOG for parts available to replace what we wear out, that'd make health and health care a lot easier. So I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the things we're doing, but I want to address it in the context of the hazards of human spaceflight as I think it's most relevant to today's session. But we all know that radiation and isolation, distance from advanced medical care, the absence of gravity and other hostile environments have a big impact on the long-term health. But if you look at really the spectrum of problems, the ones that I think we can talk about because they have addressable solutions, the exposure to radiation, the abnormal gravitational fields that we have to exist in space, directly affect systems that you've heard a lot about today thus far, skeletal muscle, the immune system, etc. And with the exception of these logistical challenges of delivering conventional care in space, the rest of the things I think can be addressed with some of the new tools and approaches we're developing in cellular medicine. So let's talk a little bit about radiation, something near and dear to everybody's heart, even those of us who are even flying above flight level 300. You wind up recognizing that you're exposed to more radiation than you are on the ground. And the most common effects of radiation, as illustrated here, if you look at these with any sense of what does this emulate, it emulates what happens to us during old age. Increasing risks of a number of diseases like cancer, cardiovascular disease, the changes to our bone and muscle, all these things are common to both radiation, which is a form of accelerated aging. Now, I don't want to get into much of the detail because you've heard a lot about it already, but the molecular and cellular events that are triggered by exposure to radiation all lead to the development of these cells that Heather just spoke about, these senescent cells, which if you think about them, they're just they're the over-the-hill cells that when they stick around too long, they wind up contributing to an array of pro-inflammatory factors that disrupt the normal system of renovation and renewal that keeps us young. You know, the 25 trillion cells that occupy our bodies all came from somewhere, right? They all came from that original fertilized egg, that single cell that gives rise to trillions and trillions of cells in our lifetime. That replicative fidelity that exists from the cells that are derived from the fertilized egg and become the placenta, this organ that I became fascinated with about 30 years ago when stem cells first emerged as a potential scientific platform for therapeutics, is one of the unique places we can find the replacement parts that you find in an aircraft AOG. Now, Helen pointed out beautifully that the cellular and molecular hallmarks of aging really all boil down to problems with the biological software system in every cell and the integrity of that system to be able to make good copies of itself, as well as produce all of the different gene products that are encoded in that biological software. That combined with the metabolic systems in cells and the fact that we use up the cells that are there to replace the old, dead, or diseased cells, give us places to look at as potential addressable solutions to maintain health as we age, and also as we're exposed to different injurious stimuli. Now, the World Health Organization says aging is basically the result of accumulation of molecular and cellular damage that leads to declining performance in our tissues and organs. And radiation exposure is a model of accelerated aging through the induction of this senescence process. Now, if you want to know what we're all aiming at and what you've heard all day today, is that if you look at the normal aging curve, everybody lives pretty well until a point where their functional reserve declines below a critical threshold, and they develop a condition called frailty. That condition leads them to becoming dependent upon others for their performance, and ultimately it has a final common pathway of disability and ultimately death. The objective of trying to delay this aging process can be linked to ways to, we believe, clean up the senescent cells we've been talking about, and replacing your reserve of replacement parts in the form of healthy stem cells, which can renew your whole ability to renovate your body in your lifetime. Now, I don't need to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway because it gives me a breather. Everybody knows about stem cells. These cells retain the incredible versatility that they can replicate themselves, and they can also divide and specialize for all the unique cell types of the body. And as I said before, from a single cell to perhaps 200 or 300 trillion cells in your lifetime, they maintain the quality of those cells by continually producing perfect copies of that biological software. Now, many, many years ago, when I was a relatively young surgeon, I got to see something which fascinated me around the time I was hearing about stem cells, and that was fetal surgery. This is an example of fetal surgery. Back when the use of ultrasound in the prenatal period allowed us to identify developing birth defects, some brave surgeons decided that they were going to identify and open up the womb of a mother carrying a fetus that had a defined birth defect. In this particular case, it was spina bifida. That's when the skin doesn't cover up the neural tube, and that exposed spinal cord, if left alone, will go on to long-term neurologic disability. So these surgeons decided to go in utero, fix that defect by simply covering the skin back over the developing spinal cord and spine, and putting the baby back into the womb and letting it complete gestation. And what I was amazed when I saw the baby after it was born was that there was no evidence of a surgical scar after going back in the womb for 6 months. And that suggested to me that there was something unique about the placenta that gave kind of an infinite regenerative potential to the developing organism. And could we somehow harvest that and use it therapeutically? So we were fortunate enough to discover that the placenta turns out to be the best source of stem cells for the emerging world of regenerative and cellular medicine, and we established a therapeutic platform by industrializing how you produce these cells to scale and quality like a pharmaceutical. And today, what we're able to do from a single placenta is literally isolate an enormous quantity of stem cells that have that unique versatility and replicative ability, as well as a category of cells that include immune cells, cells from the hematopoietic system, and all of these can be deployed in different therapeutic applications. Now, what's really amazing about the placenta is that it is nature's universal donor tissue. If you think about it, mom and dad come together to create an offspring and its placenta, which is unique genotypically from the mom, yet she carries it for 9 months and doesn't immunologically reject it, and the developing fetus doesn't reject the mom who's carrying it, even though their immune systems are not perfectly matched. Consider that in surrogate pregnancy, the mom's not even related to the fetus or placenta, yet she carries it for 9 months and doesn't reject it. That unique immunologic relationship, which is very special to the system, is completely because of the biology of the placenta. Nature's smarter than we are, and it figured out a way to allow mammalian evolution to allow the two to coexist without an immunologic conflict. We take advantage of that by turning the placenta into the source of cells for universal applications.
Bob, we've got just a few minutes. I'm sorry, we've run over.
I'm going to move quickly. So here's the targets of opportunity. We want to eliminate senescent cells, and so obviously as we get older, our natural killer cells, which are the nature's tool to get rid of these senescent cells, start to decline. The senescent cells increase, and as Helen pointed out, that's a source of our problems. We've done some great work to show that natural killer cells from the placenta, without any manipulation, do a really good job in cleaning up those senescent cells. And it's our objective to take these into the clinic and provide them as a tool to be used over time to basically clean up the dead wood, so to speak, prune the system. The next thing is to address what Helen pointed out, which is stem cell exhaustion. And the way we do that is to look at the fact that stem cell numbers decline, as Helen pointed out, as we age. They decline exponentially. So from birth until 80 years of age, you have a 1,000-fold decline in the total number of stem cells. We've shown that you can actually, I'm going to just quickly go ahead, if you actually have stem cells collected at birth and stored away, and they retain their newborn characteristics, and you simply get doses of them as you age, you actually can increase lifespan in a profound way. In this particular experiment done about 12 years ago, we could increase lifespan in experimental animals 40% compared to litter mates just by giving them back doses of their own newborn cells. That's associated with a preservation of function. And in one particular organ system that's near and dear to all of us, which is skeletal muscle tissue, a condition that plagues everybody as we age and is accelerated in certain conditions like spaceflight, the loss of muscle tissue can in fact be reversed by simply giving back doses of stem cells. And as you can see here in this slide, the vehicle-treated animals lose their muscle mass, you give them back some newborn stem cells, and they retain and preserve that muscle mass. And in our human clinical proof of concept, we've shown that by giving injections of these newborn stem cells into skeletal muscle in conditions like peripheral artery disease or diabetic foot ulcers, where you just have bad blood supply and bad metabolism, we could reduce the loss of muscle tissue. We could improve the blood flow in the extremity that was affected. We could speed up the closure of wounds. And this can be deployed either by direct injection or even systemic administration by an IV infusion. So the summary here is that some of the health hazards associated with spaceflight can be addressed by extensions of cellular and regenerative medicine tools we've already developed. I believe senolytic cell therapy, which we're going to make available at Fountain Life and through our network, is a plausible way to deliver off-the-shelf, one-size-fits-all cells that can revert, and we can reverse stem cell exhaustion with more of these newborn cells. And if you combine the two, we think that's the best strategy in addressing age-related diseases, as well as the diseases that are associated with exposure to radiation, long-duration spaceflight, and so on. And the nice thing about this is these cells can be processed, cryopreserved, and they last for about 100 years. With that, I just want to thank you for your time. And as pointed out, we think that there's a lot of information chock full in this book, and hopefully some of you get a chance to read it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. That was excellent. Listen, everybody, I apologize. We've gone over, and that's my fault. I've talked to Richard. We've got a 5-minute film from Vincent Giampapa. Those who want to take a break, there's going to be a 15-minute break. Those who want to take a break can take a break now. And those who want to stay and hear the 5-minute video, which basically is everybody up here agrees, and we all should agree, we should be banking our astronaut stem cells now. And I have several clinical folks, several examples of how that could have helped folks later on in life, but we should do that, and we should be taking it to space. So with that, I again apologize and thank you, Richard.
Do what you need to do. We're going to start at 3:15 for the next presentation.
Okay. I want to thank the AV folks too, and we're going to stay here and take questions. I'd also, if you could play the Vincent Giapapa 5-minute video right now, that would be great. Thank you.
It's a pleasure and honor to be part of this
Thank you,
meeting
Bob.
today. I'd like to thank Smith Johnston, a patient and friend, for inviting me to share my thoughts on some important questions regarding future space flights. You know, there are 3 key challenges we know of at the moment. Zero gravity, which creates a loss of muscle bone mass, cardiopulmonary function, and CNS function. Radiation exposure results in decreased immune function, DNA damage, shorter telomeres, and stem cell dysfunction. Combined, these conditions mimic accelerated aging. Have we considered the consequences of these effects on future space travelers? Zero gravity affects the human body on all levels, both short and long term. The neurovestibular system, cardiovascular system, the locomotor system. Both American and Russian space explorers have medically documented the effects of space radiation on their bodies. Key areas of concern are the impact on the neurobehavioral system. This area impacts decision-making, fatigue, and anxiety. And recent evidence of damage to neural stem cells in the hippocampus region of the brain strongly suggests serious memory deficits in both short and long-term memory, and may be major concerns. The combined effects of space radiation and zero gravity create a perfect storm. Accelerated aging throughout the body. The immune system is one of the biggest concerns, followed by general neurological and brain deficits. Numerous articles have been published to document these effects. The immune system particularly suffers damage to its hematopoietic stem cells and a special fraction of these cells called natural killer cells. This is the area of biggest concern. There are few official protocols that have been established to prepare space travelers for each step of their journey, especially focused on immune function. This includes what might need to be done pre-flight, in-flight, and returning to Earth. These are all areas that need to be addressed with potential treatments to mitigate the effects of human immune decline and accelerated aging due to long-term space voyages. You know, the real problem is rapid cellular aging. This creates damage to DNA, shorter telomeres, decreased immune function, increased cellular mutations, decreased stem cell function, and chronic inflammation. You know, these are all causes of aging we know of on Earth. Just imagine these events happening at rates dramatically faster on board a journey to Mars or even to the moon. Scientists estimate that the human body deteriorates 10 times faster in space than on planet Earth. What does that potentially mean to a normal health span and lifespan for our astronauts? Let's take a look at what is presently available as potential solutions to these problems. Pre-flight, collection, storage, and infusion of stem cells has been used on Earth for immune reconstitution for decades with much success. This should be the first step in preparation for spaceflight. It can serve as a source of restoration of immune function and regenerative potential due to the conditions creating rapid cellular aging. Kind of think of it as a source of bioinsurance that could be used during the journey, after landing off-world and upon return to Earth. In flight, previously collected individual stem cells should be stored in a highly insulated compartment aboard a vessel and can serve as a way of restoring DNA and stem cell damage due to unexpected radiation exposure from galactic and solar sources. Unrepaired damage to our stem cells and DNA could result in in-flight immune decline, susceptibility to infections, and general health and functional defects. One of the key causes of damage to our stem cells and immune function is damage to our DNA. This damage is directly correlated to the time spent in space and the amount of radiation exposure. A unique compound called AC11, a natural plant extract, has the documented ability to repair double-stranded DNA breaks in humans, which is the primary damage that occurs due to space radiation. Monitoring DNA damage rates by a simple urine test prior to and during spaceflight is also available now. Upon arrival at journey's end, any off-world location with sparse atmosphere also creates a problem regarding radiation exposure for astronauts. This constant radiation exposure at the surface would create a similar impact as spaceflight on DNA and stem cells over time. Having a prepared reservoir of individual stem cells would once again allow for the maintenance and repair of immune function and help with restoring the loss of physical function due to decreased gravity and the radiation effects off-world. Upon arrival back to Earth, the combined effects of a long journey's exposure to radiation and zero gravity, as well as accelerated aging environments, is something whose effects are not seen or felt immediately. This is a time when the potential impact of a long journey would ideally be treated with a regenerative biological infusion consisting of your own previously collected stem cells in order to restore immune function, organ damage, and accelerated stem cell aging. In the near future, perhaps these originally stored stem cells may be functionally enhanced and combined with even more potent immunological natural killer cells. The exciting thing is, this cell research is already underway. Spaceflight creates accelerated aging during and after a mission. RMI's Regenesis program successfully provides science-based solutions that may mitigate some of the damage from space flight. We now have the nascent technology to help extend the health spans and lifespans of astronauts for decades longer than we thought possible. RMI successfully treated 3 senior astronauts who have already begun participating in this program. We welcome both NASA and other interested astronauts to inquire what the present existing technologies that RMI have to offer at the moment. As we go far beyond where man has ever gone before, we must prepare and think far beyond the way we have in the past. Thank you.
All right, everybody. I think we're, again, apologize for going over. I thought I had a little more time. And, but I'd like to thank my panelists who are still here. And thank you. And if you've got any questions, yeah.
Just a general question. I think, so my background, I'm electrical engineering, did my PhD work with cardiovascular space, actually trained at Cleveland Clinic, using radiomics and a few other things for AFib problems. But I'm an internist, aerospace medicine, and so on now. And I think one of the challenges as an internist is if you're doing the preventive medicine side of things is that a lot of pressures within the healthcare system to not focus on that as much. And many people don't come to the doctor unless there's an issue. Not everybody, but many people. And so I was just kind of wondering, sometimes some of the challenges I face with that is really knowing whether or not you're making a big impact with any one person, because you're applying your population-based studies towards one individual and you believe that these are going to help this person, because on average they do help, and you do things that are evidence-based. And I was wondering, in your cases, I was hearing a lot of presenting methods and techniques that, like genomics has a lot of reproducibility issues. And so if you're applying these population studies that haven't necessarily all been validated in the same way, how do you convince yourself that you're actually making positive improvement for any one person?
And that'll do it. I think we're getting booted out of here.
That's a great question. So we believe that sequential, at least for the things that we're trying to treat right now, it's sequential imaging and sequential testing. So we don't do a one and done. They come every single year. And what we're trying to do is democratize access to this. So when I talk about, so we built a health insurance company around this that provides the diagnostic testing on the front end because we're aligned with employers, but also it's increasing access points and point of care testing to where you don't have to go to the doctor's office. We actually think all this healthcare is going to move outside the doctor's office to your home over time.
I think we're gonna have to go. I'm sorry. Thank you.